As Michael Myers spies on his sister and her boyfriend at the beginning of the movie, you'll notice that the clown mask actually belongs to the boyfriend, or at least he found it there and decided to incorporate it. He brings it up with him when the two decide to go upstairs. This small detail may be the key to understanding the entire film. The opening scene is shown through the perspective of the 6-year-old voyeur, Michael Myers. He's at an age where kids are very impressionable. What a child sees at this age can shape who they become. Children his age also normally aren't capable of understanding topics of a mature nature. He sees the boyfriend put on this mask and kiss Judy with it, then goes upstairs to do something in the dark. It is perhaps not the first time Michael has seen something like this without their knowledge of it, but he wasn't supposed to see this, and he doesn't know any better than to imitate it. He grabs a phallic object and takes it upstairs. He comes across the mask and puts it on himself, just copying what he had seen through the window. When he enters the room, he looks at Judy, then looks at the recently used bed, then back at Judy. This little camera movement suggests that he probably has seen the deed done before. He uses the object against Judy, then, as he had seen the boyfriend do, immediately leaves, goes down the stairs, and goes outside. For the first time, we see Michael, and he's wearing the red, yellow, green, and blue clown costume, which matches the red, yellow, green, and blue shirt that Judy's boyfriend had been wearing. The trauma of that night's events had all spawned from a bad imitation of an act that the child was never supposed to see, and this experience would shape everything that would happen when Michael returned 15 years later. To learn the meaning behind this and other iconic scenes, stick around to the end of this video. Black cats and goblins and broomsticks and ghosts, covens of witches with all of their hosts. You may think they scare me, you're probably right. Black cats and goblins on Halloween night. Welcome to Things You Missed. Yes, I'm finally doing Halloween. Now, as a disclaimer, there are certain things that happen in the Halloween sequels that kind of recontextualize what happens in this original movie. But for this video, I'm just gonna analyze the original as a standalone movie, and you'll see why as we get further into this. For this series, I'll also be joined by YouTube's resident Halloween expert, Jimmy Champagne.
What we now know as one of horror's biggest franchises started as a small independent film directed by John Carpenter. There's not much I can say in this section that hasn't already been covered on plenty of other channels, but I think you might be surprised at some of the things you missed. So let's jump back into them now.
One of the best parts about Halloween is that iconic soundtrack, which kicks off at the very beginning of the film, where we see the opening titles next to a jack-o'-lantern. You'll notice the cutouts of the nose and mouth are connected by this slice. I've seen it suggested that this makes it look like somebody holding a knife. I can kind of see that, but I'm really more interested in the camera movement, which pushes forward all the way into the jack-o'-lantern's left eye. I see this as a foreshadowing of the climax of the movie, where Laurie used a coat hanger to poke out Michael's left eye so she can escape the closet. I mentioned how Michael's youth may have impacted his development when it comes to mature topics. As the admirable Spencer Charnas puts it, stabbing in the dark. Think about it, there's more than one meaning there. But both meanings are intertwined by the matchbox that Michael finds after breaking out of the sanitarium and into the station wagon that he hijacks. It says, "The Rabbit in Red Lounge." Rabbits are often used as an adult symbol, while red, well, you've seen a horror movie before, you know what red stands for.
Blood. It stands for blood.
Yes, thank you for your insight, Jimmy Champagne. The horror genre has no shortage of fictional towns that fans would probably love to visit. Maybe you'd like a creamy bowl of clam chowder in Derry, Maine, or soak up some sun in Amity Island. One of the most famous examples is Halloween's own Haddonfield, Illinois. Having lived in Illinois as a kid, go Cubs go, I was curious about where Haddonfield is located.
I always like this location a lot because it's pretty close to the place where I grew up in Southeast Michigan.
When attempting to pick up Michael, the nurse asks why they're taking him up to Hardin County. Haddonfield may not be a real place, but Hardin County is, which means the story must take place way down at the bottom tip of the state. However, both direct sequels show police paraphernalia from Warren County, which is all the way to the west, while Halloween 4 places the town in Livingston County, closer to the northeast by Chicago. I think the idea is that Haddonfield is just supposed to be a stand-in for any small town in America, a kind of every town USA ordeal.
Of course, I don't think there's anywhere in Illinois that has outdoor schools or palm trees, so it's probably best not to focus on the location too much. In fact, the name Haddonfield actually comes from the writer-producer of the movie Deborah Hill's hometown, which was Haddonfield, New Jersey. And on top of that, the name Michael Myers comes from the European distributor who put out Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, and made sure it was an international success. Because you know, naming an immortal serial killer after someone is the most sincere form of flattery. And on a completely unrelated side note, I fully expect your first slasher slasher villain to be named after me.
I guess nobody told that to the character of Michael Myers though, because as I mentioned earlier, he still thinks that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. Just as he did 15 years ago, he finds himself a costume before going on his next rampage. Once again, he chooses a one-piece jumpsuit and a mask, but this time the jumpsuit is a mechanic's attire instead of the clown suit, and the mask is a heavily modified Shatner mask stolen from the hardware store.
Although, or maybe because William Shatner would have been instantly recognizable back in 1978, they made a ton of alterations to the mask, like painting the skin stark white, dyeing the hair brown, and widening the eye holes. It basically removed every identifiable feature from the mask, which if you think about it is perfect for a character named The Shape, who's literally the absence of all character.
Given the psychosexual subtext that I've highlighted for this character, it's probably no coincidence that he chooses to imitate a male heartthrob from a popular TV series, one who happens to have given one of the most noteworthy on-screen kisses in television history. The psychosexual metaphors do not end there though. This theme touches many aspects of the film, like in this scene where Laurie Strode is walking to school while singing a little song to herself.
I wish I had you all alone, just the two of us.
Notice how when Michael steps into frame, we can hear his heavy breathing against the mask as he stares her all the way down the sidewalk. Of course, at the end of the movie, we would later find that her idea of being all alone with a man is far different than his idea of being all alone with her, or any of the other babysitters he would encounter in the neighborhood. But before we get there is an interesting scene in Laurie's English class that we can analyze to learn more about Michael Myers' true nature.
No matter what course of action Collins took, he was destined to his own fate, his own day of reckoning.
As Laurie sits in the back of her English class, her teacher gives a lecture about fate, and she asks the class to compare two authors' different portrayals of it. Laurie answers that one author, Costaine, saw fate as being related to religion, while the other, Samuel, saw it as a natural element. The teacher then expands upon Laurie's answer.
That's right, Samuel's definitely personified fate. In Samuel's writing, fate is immovable, like a mountain. It stands where man passes away. Fate never changes.
After watching the movie a few times, this interpretation starts to sound familiar. It's almost as if the English teacher is talking about Michael Myers, who Laurie briefly spots out the window during this scene. Michael is the personification of fate. Michael is literally this immovable force that will end the lives of nearly anyone that he sets his sights on. Throughout the movie, Dr. Loomis raves about how Michael has nothing but evil behind his empty eyes. He is the only one who fully understands the threat that Michael represents. If Michael is the personification of fate, then Loomis is essentially the author Samuel's, warning everyone that fate is coming for them.
Perhaps another clue to this metaphor comes from the name of the character Dr. Samuel Loomis, who, side note, is my favorite character in the Halloween franchise. The names of these two authors seem fictional, or at the very least, they're not obvious to us as the audience when the teacher mentions the names Samuels and Costaine. Because of that, it's extremely likely that Samuels and Sam Loomis having very similar names was an intentional clue. There's another potentially noteworthy point about Sam Loomis that I think is worth mentioning. If you look at Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 classic Psycho, there's a character named Sam Loomis. Normally, I don't think this would be worth bringing up in a video, but there are a few other connections to Psycho in Halloween. So in Psycho, the character Sam Loomis sleeps with the character Marion Crane, and in Halloween, there's a character named Sam Loomis who hangs out with the character named Marion. Her name is Marion Chambers, but it's still Marion. And then you gotta think about the fact that Marion Crane is played by Janet Leigh in Psycho, and Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mom. Jamie Lee Curtis plays the main character in Halloween, Laurie Strode. And finally, the lighting in Halloween is clearly inspired by the lighting in Psycho. There are many scenes in Halloween where you see characters striped in shadow, like the light is coming through blinds or other horizontal objects.
Then there's a broader connection with the film's antagonists. Spoiler alert for Psycho until the end of this chapter. Michael Myers and Norman Bates are both disturbed by mental conditions acquired in their youth. They both seem to be affected by an Oedipus complex, or at least some variation of it. Norman develops this complex for his mother, while Michael vents his developmental issues into his sister, Judith. Although Judith was his first target, all we really know is that she's a teenager, and it seems to be her activity with her boyfriend that sets Michael off. When he returns to Haddonfield on Halloween in 1978, his attack pattern continues. He claims 4 human victims in this movie, and comes after a 5th, which is Laurie, but she's able to evade him. The first was the mechanic, which was off screen. We can't really analyze that one. The other 3 are sexually active teenagers, just like Judith was. In fact, these girls hardly seem to think about anything besides hooking up. At one point, when Laurie mentions that she forgot her chemistry book, Linda raves about how she never brings her books home because she doesn't need them. She's a liar though. She does have 2 books with her. One Love Forever and Tender Love something. We don't really get a good look at this one. The girls' priorities are clear. Laurie prioritizes her future by wanting to study and get good grades. Linda is more interested in love and getting busy. You could say that they represent the liberation movement that was going on from the 1960s to the 1980s, where traditional codes of conduct were being challenged. Laurie represents the traditional point of view. She's always covered up and very modest about herself. Her friends are, well, the opposite of that. They look for any excuse to be a little bit more promiscuous. Have you ever seen someone completely strip down and throw their entire outfit in the wash after a small spill? When Annie is in her underwear, Laurie is actually adding on layers. She puts on an apron while gutting a pumpkin with the kids. Annie has a cigarette in the car. She easily inhales it, but Laurie chokes on the smoke, showing us that she's not used to breathing in poison. She is innocent and pure. These girls are wired with teenage hormones. The difference is that Linda and Annie are acting on their urges while Laurie keeps them internalized.
God, I've got a shirt on. That's all you ever think about.
I think that's all you ever think about.
That's not true. I think about lots of things. Now, why don't we not stand here talking about them and get down to doing them?
Annie even teases Laurie for not being totally consumed with dating like she is.
Laurie, dear. He wants to talk to you. He wants to take you out tonight.
We come to find out that Laurie actually does have a crush. She just doesn't see herself as part of this whole liberation movement. When Annie tells her she could ask someone to the dance, she literally says,
You could do that, I couldn't.
I even found myself wondering if the book that Laurie forgets, her chemistry book, is an intentional comment about her character. Her two friends have boyfriends, but Laurie is single. She hasn't developed that chemistry with a man yet.
Writer-director John Carpenter and writer-producer Deborah Hill have given many interviews over the years where they clarified that it was never their intent to have the main character's survival be mainly because she stays a virgin throughout the entire film. With that being said though, they've also attributed Laurie's survival to her alertness, whereas her friends are distracted with horny endeavors. I guess they're saying that because it adds a little bit of nuance to their writing, and they are totally within their right to do so, but to me, it's all the same. It's kind of obvious that Michael is trying to recreate his sister's final night with other less driven teens, and it's Laurie's lack of beguilement that helps her survive till the end. And just for some quick trivia, Jamie Lee Curtis has talked about in interviews that she was actually kind of surprised that she was cast as the goody two-shoes character Laurie Strode, because in real life, she was actually more like Annie and Linda.
This makes sense if we analyze Michael's behavior. When school first lets out, one of the elementary kids, Richie, runs into Michael. There's an ample opportunity to take him out, but he just lets him run along. There are two moments when Michael seems to eye Tommy Doyle as he walks home from school, but ultimately just moves on. He's not James Charles. He doesn't seem interested in little boys. Although Tommy and Lindsay are afraid of the boogeyman, there's never a moment where he actually pursues them. It was always about sticking his knife into Haddonfield High School's most promiscuous teens. I mean, look how he's holding the knife right there. I mean, come on.
It's never really been confirmed one way or the other, which I kind of like, but the leading theory as to why Michael is trying to go after teenagers to be his victims is because they remind him of his sister and her boyfriend. Oh, and he also thinks they're all unpure, which is why he can go after Laurie Strode, who's a virgin.
Loomis and Sheriff Brackett are worried about the safety of the town's trick-or-treaters, but this never turns out to be a problem. Even though this kid doesn't have a costume. I mean, what the hell, kid? It's Halloween. You gotta get yourself a costume. Michael's Freudian issues aren't just about who he's going after. It's also how he's going about it. But before we get there are some important secrets to decipher in Laurie's room. When the girls get out of school, you can hear the cheerleaders practicing in the background. We're from Haddonfield, couldn't be prouder. Can't hear us now, we'll yell a little louder. I see this cheer as a foreshadowing of that evening's events, where there would be quite a lot of yelling from Haddonfield's student body. The second line, can't hear us now, we'll yell a little louder, also fits in nicely with the screams that finally get Dr. Loomis's attention. The ground is dry, and the ground is wet. Laurie goes home, where we see for the only time the inside of her room. Those of you who are familiar with my videos will probably expect me to point out this Raggedy Ann doll on her dresser. While it is true that this is the same kind of doll as the supposedly haunted doll that inspired the Annabelle movies, and while it is also true that Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated the doll in 1970, a safe 8 years before Halloween came out, I'm not entirely sure if John Carpenter put it in the movie just to be creepy, or if it was just a popular doll at the time. All I can really say with certainty is that this doll, seen later at the Wallace's house, is way creepier. Laurie has a large poster of a painting by James Ensor, a Belgian expressionist painter from the 1800s, who is most famous for portraying human figures wearing grotesque masks. That may not seem like much of a connection today when masked horror movie killers are plentiful, but you have to remember when Halloween came out, Michael Myers wearing a mask was kind of a novel concept. This was the movie that started the trend. Laurie looks out the window and sees Michael standing behind some bed sheets on a clothesline. There seems to be a running theme of Michael appearing behind sheets and bed sheets, which again all ties into the psychosexual themes that I pointed out throughout this video. When Annie sees Michael in the laundry room, it's through a sheet. And when he appears to Linda in the bedroom, he's wearing a bedsheet ghost costume. So we have all of these associations tying Michael's appearances to the idea of going to bed with someone. And since I failed to bring this up in my It's 1990 episode, I have to mention this here. The production designer and editor of Halloween was Tommy Lee Wallace. He went on to direct Halloween 3, but he also went on to direct It, where he once again used a line of bedsheets blowing in the wind for a scare. Also, it looks like the guy has like at least 3 characters named after him: Tommy Doyle, Lee Brackett, and Lindsay Wallace.
That afternoon, Loomis heads over to Judith Myers' gravesite, correctly assuming that Michael will try to go there at some point, but unfortunately for him, the gravekeeper talks his ear off.
Yeah, you know, every town has something like this happen. I remember over in Russellville, old Charlie Bowles, about 15 years ago.
He tells the story of a guy who went into his garage one night and grabbed a hacksaw and then came inside and presumably turned his family into mincemeat. Back in 2014, John Carpenter did an interview with Halloween Daily News where he described why he put this weirdly specific story in the movie. Apparently, Russellville was a city in Kentucky near where John went to college. And old Charlie Bowles was named after the father of his girlfriend, who was in the Kentucky Mafia, which I literally just found out existed, and apparently that guy had her husband whacked. In-laws, am I right? Anyway, they find Judith's grave already uprooted when they get there.
They'd do anything for Halloween.
Guilty as charged.
Loomis's next stop is the old Myers house, which has gained a reputation for being supposedly haunted. Now, this next one isn't a traditional thing you missed, but it's more something that nobody talks enough about. Loomis and Sheriff Brackett discover the remains of a dog and realize the body is fresh. And this is Dr. Loomis's response?
He got hungry.
So Michael got hungry and pulled a rice gum? This is the most messed up thing in the movie and nobody ever talks about it, so I just had to bring it up and ask, why? Also, when they go upstairs, the wallpaper is different than it was in 1963. We know that nobody lived there after the Myers, so that means that Mr. and Mrs. Myers actually tried to change the wallpaper and continue living there alone after Judith was killed and Michael was sent to the sanitarium. My personal headcanon says they thought they could get past the trauma of what happened there if they changed the look of the room, but ultimately it was too sad and they ended up abandoning the house anyway.
That evening, Laurie and Annie get settled in as the two are babysitting at houses right across the street from each other. In what I can only imagine is the 1978 version of iPad parenting, Laurie puts a movie on the TV called The Thing from Another World, which came out back in 1951. It's a real movie and it was one of John Carpenter's biggest inspirations, and it was kind of a preview of things to come for him because in 1982 he would release his own remake of it, which was just shortened to The Thing.
Yeah, I think that one sounds vaguely familiar.
And just like with Halloween, Big Trouble in Little China, The Fog, and pretty much every other John Carpenter movie, when it came out, it was a critical and commercial bomb, but then as the decades went on, it became revered as a classic. Can you see why all John Carpenter really seems to want to do these days is sit inside and play Fallout?
Why the glum face? I thought random murder was routine around here.
As Laurie and Annie talk on the phone about the possibility of attending the homecoming dance with her crush Ben Tramer, Michael appears outside the house for the first time. At the beginning of the movie, we saw Michael spying on a teenage relationship from his point of view, but now we're seeing the other side, as Tommy notices the shape standing in the dark outside of the Wallace's house.
Michael's many background appearances are one of the things that makes this movie so fun to revisit year after year. Every time they release it on a new medium like DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K Blu-ray, someone manages to find him in a different spot, and I love that.
Yeah, Jimmy, I can't wait until you see this movie after you upgrade from seeing it on Laserdisc. Just as bedsheets have served as a link between Michael and the things we do in the dark, well, darkness is also a reminder of that thing we do in the dark. Now you're probably reaching for that button to click off this video because almost all horror movies take place in the dark, right? Well, hold on just a minute. It's not just the darkness here, although lighting-wise, this movie is really dark. There are scenes where the screen is almost entirely black. You could say this is just a result of this being a low-budget horror movie shot on film, but it's not just a couple of scenes. There are a lot of scenes with barely any light. 2, the darkness is acknowledged in the dialogue by Linda.
Hey, it's totally dark.
Yeah.
And 3, what happens in the dark is also relevant here. For example, the screams in this movie. They aren't your typical blood-curdling horror movie screams. They almost sound more like something else. When Laurie hears Annie trying to scream over the phone, she even kind of acknowledges that it sounds like there are some extracurricular activities going on.
All right, Annie. First I get your famous chewing, now I get your famous squealing.
That's not even all of them. Next time you watch the movie, that's something you can look out for. But it's not just the screams. I'm also gonna look at how some of these kills are executed, and I'll be analyzing what the ending of John Carpenter's Halloween really represents. Keeping on topic with my main thesis about Michael's rampage being a release of distorted psychosexual tension, let's look at the death scenes of each of Laurie's friends and see how they tie into this idea. The first to go is the sheriff's daughter, Annie Brackett. Michael ambushes her when she hops into the car to go pick up her boyfriend, but she realizes something is wrong when she notices that the windows are fogged up, a sign that somebody had been breathing inside of the enclosed airspace for some time. Anyone who had a high school or college girlfriend is probably familiar with the concept of the fogged up car window. Since teens usually don't have a good place to get intimate, they often end up driving a car to a secluded location for some privacy. So it's probably an intentional choice for Michael to replicate that. And the fact that she was on her way to pick up her boyfriend certainly fits with the pattern of Michael's attacks.
Someone smart like Laurie probably would have realized that somebody is in the car.
The next victims would be Linda and her boyfriend Bob. It really bothers me how Bob just leaves the car door open when they first pull up to the house.
Yeah, why does he do that?
The way he stalks them is very reminiscent of Michael's childhood Halloween in 1963. He watches them make out on the couch, and he continues to spy on them after they move things upstairs. Notice his shadow passing by right here. In a break from their activities, Bob goes to the kitchen to get a couple of drinks, and Michael uses a knife to literally pin him up to the wall, which symbolizes another teenage cliche, pin-up models. If you're somehow unfamiliar, a pin-up is just a poster of an attractive model or celebrity that teens like to pin up onto their bedroom wall so they can fantasize about them as they go to sleep. The last kill of the movie is Linda. When Michael approaches her, he's wearing a costume, which leads her to believe that this is her boyfriend, Bob. This one represents role play.
What's the matter? Can I get your ghost, Bob?
Maybe it's because I was born in the 90s, but I still don't get why that's funny. I think there's also something to be said about how easy it is for Michael to trap and kill these three, who are established to be the most likely to be distracted by the allure of hooking up, as opposed to Laurie, who is much more level-headed. At times, it feels like Michael Myers almost doesn't want to kill her. It seems like he intentionally misses her right here and cuts her shirt instead. Then again later, she's not moving, yet he sticks the knife into the couch instead. In the context of the message of the movie, it's like he's giving her a warning. He knows she has dirty thoughts, as established in the car early that afternoon, but her mind isn't consumed by dating and boys like the others, so taking her out doesn't really fit in with Michael's agenda. The chase continues on to the Doyle's upstairs bedroom. Laurie thinks that she's gotten the better of Michael, but in the background, he can be seen rising up once more in a manner very similar to Nosferatu, from the 1922 classic German horror movie. Some might say there's a phallic parallel going on here. Loomis shows up and buries some blood into his former patient, knocking him off the balcony, but when he goes to collect his spoils, the mysterious villain has disappeared. The movie ends as the iconic score shows us various locations all around the house, accompanied by the slow, unnerving breathing of the evil antagonist. The final shot takes us back once more to the Myers house, as if to suggest that this entire series of events was just another mental episode, just like the one that young Michael Myers went on all of those years ago.
I think the reason Halloween has endured so long is because at its heart, it's a simple story about a local boogeyman coming back to haunt a town on Halloween night that could be any town in America. The decision to have him escape into the night at the end of the movie was so smart, because if he's alive, that means he's out there and he could come to your town on Halloween night and you could have a run-in with him. That's what kept me up at night when I was a kid, and some of the revelations in Halloween 2 also kept me up at night, but for completely different reasons.
Thanks to Jimmy Champagne for joining me in this analysis of Halloween. Jimmy is all about Halloween and other iconic slasher franchises, so if you can't get enough blood and guts, definitely go check out his videos and subscribe. We'll be back next week with the next episode, so if you love Halloween, the holiday, or the movie series, you're in the right place. Tap that playlist on the left for more videos, and make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.